Before we get into today's show, let me tell you about the latest deal from Mike Lindell, MyPillow. Once again, the big box stores have canceled their orders simply because they don't agree with Mike Lindell's politics. They don't like it because he supports President Trump. Well, he's going to pass that savings on to you. No more middleman. And boy, does he have some great deals on the Giza Dream sheets and the Percal bed sheets. Listen to this. Giza Dream queen size, normally $139.98. Your wholesale price, $69.99 when you use promo code Joey. King size, only $79.99. The Percal queen size, normally $89.98. Your wholesale price, $29.98 when you use promo code Joey. Just call 1-800-893-4059 or go to mypillow.com. Always use promo code Joey. Free shipping options available. This allotment's not going to last very long. When they're gone, they're gone. mypillow.com. Promo code Joey. Thanks for joining me in the PhD Weight Loss and Nutrition Studios. To lose weight for the last time, visit myphdweightloss.com. Welcome in. Glad to have you as we kick off another week. We got a lot to cover today. We're now in a partial government shutdown, and Congress has left Washington with no resolution in sight. So how does this affect you? We'll break it all down for you in today's show. The FBI says DNA from one of the black gloves recovered near Nancy Guthrie's home may lead them to the kidnapper. We enter week 3 of Miss Guthrie's disappearance. Hillary Clinton's hatred of President Trump was heard on foreign soil, where the former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton clashed with a Czech leader at the Munich Security Conference in Germany over the weekend. We have those details too. Current Secretary of State Marco Rubio was also there. He had a message for European leaders too. His was drastically different than that of Hillary Clinton. CNN says President Trump has chipped away at the long-standing wall between church and state. They're not happy and say it's just the beginning. We can only hope. A parent in Maryland says she contacted State Child Protective Services to report a TPUSA-affiliated chapter organization because she's concerned that students did not allow adults in their December meeting. There's more to the story than a concerned parent. We have the details in today's show.
I told you we'd be back.
And ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free.
It's Joey Hudson.
I wanted to name it the Joey Hudson bill, but, they don't allow you to put names on bills. But I wanted to call it the Joey Hudson bill because I know that one's been near and dear to you for a number of years.
That's how it's done. Let your voice be heard.
And the truth shall set you free.
Here's Joey Hudson.
So the federal government has entered in its third partial shutdown of the last half year after Congress failed to reach an agreement on all 12 of its annual spending bills. Now, unlike past shutdowns, this one just affects the Department of Homeland Security, DHS. It comes after Democrats walked away from a bipartisan deal to fund the department amid just literally an uproar over President Trump's immigration crackdown in Minneapolis. Now, some 97% of the federal government has been funded at this point. A DHS shutdown will still have effects on everyday Americans, though. We're going to talk about some of those. Fox News' Chad Pergram had this report.
Dana, good morning. There's no way to avoid a partial shutdown. That's because Congress left town for more than a week. Democrats blocked 2 efforts to extend money for DHS. But Democrats will not support DHS until they see reforms at ICE.
Democrats will not support a blank check for chaos. This vote today asked a simple question. Will you rein in ICE's abuses, or will you vote to extend the chaos? Republicans chose chaos, and the Democrats, we refused.
ICE is funded through 2029 thanks to the big, beautiful bill. But other agencies, ranging from the Coast Guard to FEMA to the TSA, are unfunded. Many employees must work without paychecks for the third time since fall.
A TSA agent is going to go without a paycheck. Why? So that you can posture politically. I'm over it. Everybody on that side of the aisle knows that ICE and CBP will continue to be funded. They're going to continue to enforce the law just as they should.
Democrats rejected a late offer from the GOP to reform ICE. Republicans are exasperated that part of the government is closed again.
If they want to shut down DHS, that is on them. They have not learned their lesson yet. They continue to do this over and over, try to shut down the government. The American people are tired of it.
Now, it's doubtful there's any resolution to this impasse for weeks. Democrats believe they have the high ground. That's because the public opposes aggressive tactics by ICE, caught on video. Dana?
All right, Chad. One of the things that they take away is the cybersecurity office, which to me, I'm like, that can't run part-time, indeed, and especially in this day and age. Thank you so much, Chad.
All right, so that's where we are. What does it mean to you? Let's just kind of go through a few of these. Air travel. If you have a trip coming up this week, because, again, Congress is not in session this week unless for some reason they're called back, which is not very likely. So disruptions to TSA. The agents are responsible, of course, for security checks at nearly 440 airports across the country. This could perhaps be the most impactful part of the partial shutdown to the average American, particularly those who travel. Acting Administrator McNeil told lawmakers at a hearing last week that around 95% of TSA employees, roughly about 61,000, we're told, are deemed essential and will be forced to work without pay in the event of a shutdown. And we have that shutdown which started Saturday, so here we are. She said of the last shutdown, we heard reports of officers sleeping in their cars at airports to save money on gas, selling their blood and plasma, and taking on second jobs to make ends meet. Now, how does that make you feel if you're ready to go through an airport to get on an airplane to travel somewhere? But it could take some time, we're told, before TSA funding could translate to delays. TSA agents, like other essential federal workers, receive back pay once the shutdown was over. So they ended up getting the money, but it doesn't help them during the shutdown, particularly if they haven't budgeted very well and they don't have any savings. Or maybe they've already maxed out their credit cards and can't put any more on it. TSA paychecks, we're told, are due to be issued March the 3rd and could see agents getting reduced pay depending on the length of the shutdown. Agents would not be at risk of missing a full paycheck until March the 17th. So there's still a little time because they do have some money funding set aside. But if that happens, Americans could see delays or maybe even cancellations at the country's busiest airports as TSA agents are forced to call out of work and get second jobs in order to make ends meet. Again, not a very comforting idea to know that our air traffic security could be threatened here. Now, the other idea that the other agency that could be affected too, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, is one of the largest, most critical recipients of federal funding under DHS. Associate Administrator of the Office of Response and Recovery, Greg Phillips, told Congress last week that FEMA has enough funds to continue disaster response through a shutdown in the immediate future, but that its budget would be strained in the event of an unforeseen catastrophic disaster. So in other words, we have to just pray that nothing happens while this shutdown occurs, and FEMA doesn't have to respond very quickly. That means Americans hit by an unexpected natural disaster during the shutdown could see delayed response to their homes and to their small businesses. Others who have already lived through a natural disaster in the last year but still have not received their checks. FEMA is currently working through a backlog worth billions of dollars. They could see that relief delayed even further during this shutdown. Now, the other agency that's part of DHS that could be affected is the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services Program. American business owners who rely on certain types of worker visas could see processing times extended during this shutdown. The majority of those programs are funded by fees and are largely untouched, we're told. However, areas like E-Verify, the EB-5 Immigrant Investor Regional Center Program, and a list of others could be affected by this shutdown. USCIS could allow employers to use alternative processes if E-Verify is disrupted, we're told, but it's not clear how much time it would add to a business owner's day-to-day responsibility to learn a new route for that paperwork. Look, Congress just needs to do their job and avoid these shutdowns altogether. You agree? Text me, email me, joe@joeyhudson.com. Quick update on the Nancy Guthrie case. The FBI has collected DNA from a glove found near Miss Guthrie's house, which may have come from the armed suspect, we're told. The bombshell revelation means that investigators could finally have DNA evidence from the primary suspect, in the abduction of Today's Show host Savannah Guthrie's mom. Fox News, an FBI spokesperson told Fox News, the one with the DNA profile recovered is different and appears to match the gloves of the subject in the surveillance video. The glove, one of 16, we're told, found by detectives, appears to be the one that the New York Post observed FBI evidence specialists collecting from a roadside, we're told, about 2 miles from Miss Guthrie's Tucson's home. Investigators told Fox it appears to match the black nitrile gloves pulled over another pair of gloves, which were worn by this masked robber, kidnapper, burglar, whatever. Sources caution that the glove isn't confirmed to be from the suspect, merely that it looks like the one that could be. Now, the thing that concerns me is they talk about that this black rubber-type glove was pulled over another pair of gloves. I'm just wondering how reliable that DNA would be. I was thinking that they had recovered the glove that he had actually closest to his skin. Evidently, that's not the case. FBI evidence technicians, we're told, are now working to double-check the DNA results. I guess the good thing is if they can find the DNA of Miss Guthrie and another person on the same glove, then that pretty much guarantees that the other person is the suspect, right? Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos, who's been under fire for the way his agencies handled this, said yesterday that the DNA results are still pending at a private lab in Florida. As you may recall, he has chosen to use this private lab rather than allowing the FBI to use their lab at Quantico. So detectives, we're told, are prioritizing certain DNA submissions and that this agency is working around the clock to make this happen.
Joey Hudson here. You tried keto, paleo, Weight Watchers, intermittent fasting. You lose weight, then it comes right back. You blame yourself, your willpower, your discipline. But here's the truth. It was never about willpower. There's one thing that determines whether your body burns fat or stores it, and if you don't fix that first, every diet will fail. At PhD Weight Loss, they identify that one thing, and they build a plan that works with your body, not against it. And if you call now, you're going to get 2 weeks free in the program, and they'll pay for your food so you can finally see real answers without more trial and error. If you've done the yo-yo dieting and want clarity, call PhD Weight Loss now and mention Joey Hudson. No more guessing, just answers. Call 864-644-1900. That's 864-644-1900. Say Joey Hudson. That's 864-644-1900. Also find them online at myphdweightloss.com. That's myphdweightloss.com. Do it once and for all. Lose the weight the right way by calling PhD Weight Loss today.
I occasionally check out CNN.com. Not often, but I'll kind of like to see what they're doing over there. And a headline got my attention over the weekend. Here's the headline. Trump has chipped away at the long-standing wall between church and state. It's just the beginning. It's written by Renee Marsh. Says, at first glance, the December meeting of a little-known government panel looked like ordinary bureaucratic business. But then the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau's advisory board opened its proceedings in an unusual way, she wrote, with a Christian prayer. The benediction was delivered by a White House official. Thank you for your son, Jesus, who died for our sins, the official said at one point, according to two sources who attended the meeting. Now, she goes on to write this. I mean, just like she is just astounded that a group would pray a Christian prayer at a government meeting. She writes, under President Donald Trump, moments like this, rare in recent administrations, are becoming commonplace. And that's the reason that some of those, quote, prior administrations may have had some trouble, because they took God out of government. Maybe they should have been praying a little more in the Joe Biden administration. You think? With the tone that this lady wrote this article, you'd have thought that she has just uncovered the biggest scandal in Washington. The fact that there are a lot of Christians in the Trump administration. And guess what? They pray during meetings. Wow. She says a series of faith initiatives championed by the White House have led to a systematic religious revival within the government's operations, culture, and policy. Americans have been encouraged to pray for an hour each week
Some government agencies have opened their meetings with prayer or hosted regular faith services. Bible verses and Christian imagery now appear on official government social media accounts. Now, she's writing this as if this is just horrible, that this is something we all need to be in panic about. She goes on to write, the changes, predominantly Christian in character, have been welcomed by conservative organizations that have fought for decades against an increasingly secular government while alarming longtime defenders of a separation between church and state. And she doesn't understand what the separation of church and state is. It's obvious as she continues to write this. She says both supporters and critics alike say this religious turn has little modern precedent, and it may just be the beginning. We can only pray that this is just a beginning. Wow. She said, since last year, interfaith leaders, religious legal activists, and close political allies of the president have been laying the groundwork for a broader expansion of the role of religion in public life. Now, I got to tell you, when I read this, and this is a pretty extensive article that she wrote here. Again, it's Renee Marsh writing for CNN.com. The more I read, the more encouraged I became. Now, obviously, she's writing this as a criticism of the Trump administration. But, you know, for a long time now, I've been saying we have to put God back into government. And this is just evidence. If you have CNN being critical of God being reintroduced by the Trump administration, that CNN is critical because they're praying in the Trump administration, that's nothing but good news for me. She wrote, by this summer, the group Trump's Religious Liberty Commission is expected to produce a blueprint for policy changes that could redefine the boundaries between government and religion in American life. Trump told the commission last year, we have to bring back religion in America, bring it back stronger than ever before, he said. Now, according to the writer, discussions by the commission on how to fulfill Trump's mandate have included aggressively pursuing legal action against state and local governments accused of blocking religious expression and withholding federal funding for schools viewed as hostile to faith. Again, this is she's writing this as a criticism. This is all good news. She said they've also considered ways to encourage the Supreme Court to revisit decades-old precedent governing the First Amendment's Establishment Clause, which prohibits the U.S. government from establishing a state religion or favoring one religion over the other. Now, that's the key here. When you talk about separation of church and state, that's the whole idea, is not having the U.S. government making you practice a certain religion. Doesn't mean that those Christians in the government can't practice their Christian religion. In her mind, though, this is bad. She says some participants, including President Trump, have lamented the Bible's diminished presence in schools. One member, television psychologist Phil McGraw, known as Dr. Phil, has framed the commission's work in starker terms. Dr. Phil said, we are in a religious and cultural war right now, and every single one of us is a combatant. Nobody can afford to sit on the sidelines. Again, she writes that as a criticism. Dr. Phil's right. She goes on to write, past presidents have overseen periods of religious revival in government. She uses Dwight Eisenhower as an example. He signed provisions adding under God to the Pledge of Allegiance and in God we trust to paper currency. But Randall Balmer, a professor of American religious history at Dartmouth College, said he cannot recall any administration that has pursued such a broad and deliberate effort to inject religion into government and daily life. Balmer said he finds it troubling for a political majority to dictate to everyone else how they behave and even how they believe, he said. In a statement to CNN, White House spokesperson Taylor Rogers contended that former President Joe Biden weaponized the full weight of the federal government against people of faith. She said Trump's efforts would safeguard religious freedom and eliminate the anti-religious bias that was embedded in the federal government by previous administrations. The Religious Liberty Commission, according to the author, is a significant step in that effort. Trump established a panel last year to identify threats to religious liberty across faith.
It is led by Texas Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick. It includes former Housing and Urban Development Secretary Dr. Ben Carson, longtime Trump faith advisor Paula White, and Orthodox rabbi and writer Mir Solovinci. And there are others on it as well. Commission meetings, we're told, have featured Americans of different faiths testifying that government institutions infringe on their religious practices, including challenges faced by Muslim, Jews, and Hindus. Supporters hope the commission's change will result in lasting impacts that can't be easily undone by future administrations. And this is another example of something that President Trump is doing that will be part of his legacy, hopefully going many, many years ahead in future administrations, putting God back into the government. All right, let's shift to overseas for a moment, to a stage that's become kind of a global town hall for Western leaders. Over the weekend, at the Munich Security Conference, you may have seen some headlines about this meeting. Former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton found herself in a very pointed exchange with Czech political leader Peter Makinka. I think I'm pronouncing that right, Makinka. What unfolded wasn't just a disagreement. It was a snapshot of a much broader divide inside the West about populism, sovereignty, immigration, and the direction of our democracies. Now, Ms. Clinton was on a panel discussing what she described as the state of the Western alliance. In her remarks, she was very critical of President Donald Trump and his approach towards Europe, suggesting that his policies are harmful not just to the United States, but to the global order. Then came the moment that turned heads. Makinka responded by suggesting that President Trump's rise and his continued support is not random. He framed it as a reaction to policies that, in his words, had gone too far from regular people. And here's where it gets interesting. He referenced what many voters across Europe and the U.S. have debated for years: progressive cultural shifts, gender theory debates, cancel culture, and what critics broadly describe as woke politics. And we've seen that. We've seen woke politics just explode in this past decade. Before he could fully flesh out his point, though, Ms. Clinton interjected, challenging him for examples. When he suggested that some of these cultural policies alienated everyday citizens, she countered by implying he was opposed to women's rights. The exchange got a bit tense about that time. Makinka fired back that he could tell that he was making her nervous. Now, step back from the personalities for a moment. What you saw on that stage wasn't just about Donald Trump, although Hillary Clinton was trying to make it about Donald Trump. It was about the populist wave that has reshaped politics in the U.S. and parts of Europe and other parts of the country. Beyond that, in recent years, voters in multiple countries have pushed back against what they see as elite-driven policymaking, particularly on immigration, national identity, and cultural issues. And speaking of immigration, Hillary Clinton herself made a notable admission during this very same panel. She acknowledged that immigration policy in the United States had gone too far. She described it as disruptive and destabilizing and said it needed to be fixed, though she emphasized doing so in a humane way with secure borders. And she used that word, secure borders. So evidently, Hillary Clinton is acknowledging that Donald Trump has secured our borders and we need to keep secure borders, not a wide open policy like Joe Biden had. That's a significant statement on her part. Remember, during her 2016 campaign, Ms. Clinton opposed large-scale expansion of a border wall because Donald Trump was suggesting it. Remember, that was the very basis of his first term. We're going to build the wall and let Mexico pay for it. She supported many of President Barack Obama's executive actions. She included deferred enforcement for certain undocumented immigrants. She also sought to scale back immigration raids, arguing that they created unnecessary fear in communities. At the same time,
she does seem to support deporting violent criminals. So I'd love to be able to pin Hillary Clinton down on what has been happening in Minneapolis over these past few months. I wonder if, in fact, Hillary Clinton does support what ICE has been doing in some of these communities. She's not going to say it publicly, but if she supports deporting violent criminals, doesn't that mean she supports what ICE has just been doing in Minneapolis, where they made over 4,000 arrests of the worst of the worst? In her comments in Munich, Hillary acknowledged that immigration has gone too far, and that reflects what we have seen in polls and politics, not only just in the U.S., but in other countries as well. Because you have to understand that a lot of these European countries have much tougher policies at their border. They've had secure borders for a long time. You can't just go from one country to the next without the proper documentation. And boy, do they believe in photo IDs over there. Immigration has become a defining issue all around the world. Across Europe, you've got migration debates that have fueled the rise of populist parties. In the U.S., of course, border security is consistently ranked as a top voter concern. We saw it in 2024 in a big way that led Donald Trump back to the White House. And under Trump's administration, immigration enforcement has dramatically tightened. We've seen ICE and Border Patrol actually doing the job that Congress has charged them to do. This is something that Trump supporters argue has restored order at our border. Now, let's go back to this past weekend in Munich. When Ms. Clinton criticized Trump's handling of Europe, she was echoing longstanding concerns among globalists and the traditional transatlantic leaders that Trump's America First approach disrupts alliances and shifts burdens onto European partners. And look, Donald Trump has been very open about that. Europe is going to have to pay their own. Europe is going to have to pony up and pay at least a bigger share, because the U.S. is not going to continue pumping money to foreign countries at the levels we have in the past. But back to this Czech official, Masinka. His defense wasn't about diplomatic style. It was about political cause and effect. He suggested that President Trump represents a correction, a reaction to policies that many citizens felt were imposed from the top down without broad consent among the population. And this is where the divide becomes, I guess you could say, this is kind of political, maybe philosophical, maybe. One side argues that global cooperation, that progressive cultural shifts and expanded migration reflect moral progress and economic necessity. That's one side. The other side argues that national sovereignty, border enforcement, and cultural stability are essential pillars that have been neglected. In other words, you can't have a country that really feels safe if their borders are not secure, if we're not enforcing border security and not some wide open immigration like we saw under Joe Biden. Now, when Clinton mocked the idea that critics of the, quote, woke ideology might have legitimate concerns, it reinforced something that we've seen in political debate over the years. Mutual distrust between elites and populist movements. The elite government officials, like the Clintons were and have been all these years since Bill Clinton was president. For some watching that, as they saw Ms. Clinton and this Czech leader debating back and forth, it likely felt like two different worldviews that had collided in real time on this international TV. One's grounded in international institutions, the other liberal global order. The audience wasn't just the room in Munich. The audience was anybody who could potentially watch this as this clip has gone out throughout the world, and particularly voters back home in the U.S. Now, here's the broader takeaway. The debate about Trump and what he represents is no longer confined to American cable news, is it? Because I think he has Europe and leaders of other countries, I think he has their attention, don't you? It's kind of playing out on the global stages. European leaders are grappling with the same voter frustrations that have reshaped U.S. politics. At the same time, some of these countries who have depended on American financial support realize that they're going to have to make some changes, or Donald Trump's going to cut their funding, which he's going to cut some of their funding anyway, because that's what the American people have asked him to do. And even longtime critics like Hillary Clinton are acknowledging that certain policies may have overshot public comfort levels, because, yes, she and Bill Clinton showed their support of Joe Biden. That they seemed to be respectful of Joe Biden. You didn't hear a whole lot out of them. But for Clinton now to come back and say that we have to secure our borders, knowing that that's exactly what Donald Trump has been doing, that in itself is something that I thought you'd never hear Hillary Clinton say in a public room, because she's kind of agreeing with what Donald Trump is doing right now, and we all know Hillary Clinton never agrees with what Donald Trump does. But it also underscores something important. Political movements don't rise in a vacuum. Whether you support President Trump's policies or oppose them, the reaction that he represents, and that leaders like this Czech Politico describe, come from real voter sentiment, from what the people in their countries want to do. And that's the important thing, because you got to do what the people want, or eventually they're going to rebel, and you're going to have landslide victories like Donald Trump saw in 2024.
Your comments are welcome on the Furman Ford text line, 864-477-JOEY. That's 864-477-5639. Emails always welcome, joey@joeyhudson.com. Speaking of the Furman Ford text line, it's never been more important to support locally run businesses owned by people who actually live here in the upstate. Let me take a minute to talk with you about our friends at Furman Ford. If you're looking for a new vehicle, maybe a great pre-owned vehicle, one you can trust, or maybe you're looking to order that special vehicle. Either way, if you want a new one, a brand new one, or a pre-owned that you can trust, the folks at Furman Ford, they're there to help you. Their name is on the sign because their name is on the line, because every single transaction is important to them. Jim Furman, Matthew Furman. They do business the right way. When you stop by, when you give them a call, or maybe when you just send them a quick email, you're always going to have access to a member of the Furman Ford family. And by the way, they also offer great service, and you're not going to have to wait weeks and weeks to get it done. And you do not have had to purchase your vehicle at Furman Ford. Doesn't even have to be a Ford. They service all makes and models. Visit my friends at Furman Ford online at furmanford.com, furmanford.com. Charlie Kirk's TPUSA has continued to grow since his assassination last September. It's has the left pushing back because they just can't stand the idea of these young people being exposed to conservative ideas. And the young people have just embraced it. They're on a mission. And we're seeing these chapters, existing chapters, grow and expand. We're seeing more high schools, more colleges request information to start a chapter. We're seeing more existing organizations affiliate with TPUSA. And it's just really inspiring to watch as Charlie's widow, Erica Kirk, takes the reins of this organization. I mean, just look back at just a week or so ago with their competing Super Bowl halftime show. It was huge. Well, in Maryland, a student group who is affiliated with Turning Point USA is now under the spotlight, facing criticism after they hosted a December event at a high school there. During a February 12th board meeting, a community member announced that Child Protective Services had been notified over concerns relating back to that December event of this Turning Point USA affiliated organization. Now, that should get your attention. Let's slow down. Let's unpack what actually happened here. The student group involved is called Calvert County Club America. Again, they're affiliated with Turning Point USA, but structured as its own 501c3 organization. They're independent of TPUSA, yet affiliated with them. According to the student who serves as president of the group, and remember, he's 17 years old,
the group put restrictions in place after receiving online backlash ahead of the event. He told this school board that because of the, quote, hate the group was getting online, they limited adult access to people they personally knew, volunteers and parents of attending students. He also stated that every student who attended had parental permission. Then he addressed what he described as some of the more serious accusations that have been lodged against his group. He said the group had been accused of grooming children, and he pushed back pretty hard, saying that he himself is a minor, 17 years old, and that allegations about an unnamed adult with felony charges being president of the group were false. He said, "I'm the president, I'm a child." And now think about that for a moment. A high school student standing in front of a school board defending himself and his peers against accusations that, frankly, are explosive in today's climate. Then came the criticism. A community member identified as Nancy spoke next. She expressed what she called serious concern about student safety, parental rights, and oversight. She claimed that parents and guardians were not permitted to attend the event, something the student leader's remarks appeared to dispute, at least in part. She argued that excluding parents undermines transparency and best practices for youth safety. She emphasized that students are a vulnerable population and that such events should involve supervision and background checks. Then she added that as a mandated reporter under state law, a report had been made to Child Protective Services. That kind of escalated things. Now, let's separate the fact from the emotion here. There is, at least publicly, no indication of criminal conduct. No formal charges, no announced findings, just an allegation, a report, and a political backdrop. And in this case, that political history and backdrop matters. Turning Point USA, again founded by the late Charlie Kirk, has become one of the most visible conservative youth organizations in the country. It's known for its Prove Me Wrong campus debates and outspoken positions on free market, limited government, cultural issues, freedom of speech, freedom of religion. And its presence on these high school and college campuses has drawn a lot of support, but it's also drawn a lot of opposition. Supporters say the organization gives conservative students a voice in environments they feel often lean heavily to the left, and they do. Critics argue it injects partisan politics into schools and question its methods and messaging. But here's the larger question that this particular story raises. At what point does political disagreement turn into accusations that carry legal weight? When someone invokes Child Protective Services, that's not a minor complaint. That's serious. CPS investigates. They have lasting reputational consequences even when no wrongdoing is found. And we have to be careful about that. Again, the leader of this group is 17 years old. He's a minor himself. And he stated that every student who attended had parental permission. Parents of these kids were invited to attend, but other adults were not. And in fact, they were excluded. Look, that makes sense. That's kind of common sense to me. You have parents there providing oversight, providing protection, security, but you don't have any strange adults who don't have kids there allowed to attend. What is wrong with that? And as he pointed out to this Nancy lady, a 17-year-old cannot groom another 17-year-old. Now, parents absolutely have a right to expect transparency in school-related activities. But according to the group, every single student who attended had their parents' permission. We have to think about youth safety policies. They exist for a reason. Oversight matters. Background checks matter. Clear communications matter. So if there were procedural concerns, those deserve to be clarified calmly and factually. But don't call protective services out that could potentially harm an organization. And I'm not so sure that's not what this Nancy wanted to do anyway. Nancy wants to discredit this organization simply because it's affiliated with TPUSA.
But this is a part of a broader national trend. This whole accusation of grooming these young men and young boys and girls, teenagers, without evidence. Across the country, we've seen political polarization spill into school board meetings. We've seen heated disputes over curriculum, speakers, clubs, student organizations. In many communities, the fight isn't just about policy, it's about the trust between parents and those organizations. Trust between parents and schools, trust between administrators and student groups, trust that disagreement won't immediately escalate into criminal implication. But there's another layer, too. These are teenagers. Whether you agree with Turning Point USA or not, the student who spoke is 17. He's navigating national political tensions while he's in high school, part of his club. That says something about the environment young people are growing up in right now. We've created a culture where even high school clubs can become flashpoints in these broad ideological battles. Now, to be fair, organizations, both the left and the right, operate in schools. It's just that Turning Point USA has awakened a conservative political giant among young people. It's fun to watch, and we have to encourage it. That's it for today's edition of Just the Truth. Thanks for joining me in the PhD Weight Loss Studios. To lose weight for the last time, visit myphdweightloss.com. If you haven't joined my mailing list yet, visit my website, joeyhudson.com. Click on the Connect with Joey button so that you can receive our emails and the most up-to-date news. Also, join me on my YouTube channel. Be sure and like, comment, and subscribe. Just search for Joey Hudson. As always, thanks for spending a few minutes of your day with me. Do me a favor and forward this episode to a few friends. Just click on the share button and send to your contacts. We need to build an army of conservatives to win our country back, and we can do that by continuing to share the truth with our friends and family. Keep those comments coming via the Furman Ford text line 864-477-JOEY. Email to joey@joeyhudson.com, and I love your messages on the MyPillow message line. Again, that's 864-477-JOEY, 864-477-5639. Be sure and take advantage of the MyPillow special, just $14.88 on the standard MyPillows when you use promo code Joey. Order online at mypillow.com or call 800-893-4053. We're back again tomorrow and hope you'll plan to join us. Until then, remember, God's got this. He's still in control.